They said he was too small, too broken, too late, but they were wrong. These 20 NHL players weren't supposed to make it. Some were undrafted, some battled diseases, injuries, or addiction. Others were written off before they ever got a real shot. But instead of giving up, they kept going and proved everybody wrong. From unlikely rookies to surprise legends, these stories will make you see hockey in a whole new way. You might think you know how their careers turned out, but wait until you hear what they went through to get there. If these players had quit when it got tough, we'd never know their names. No cups, no records, no moments we still talk about today, but they didn't give up. They fought through everything, and in doing so, they gave us some of the most unforgettable stories in hockey. Let's take a look at 20 players who overcame the odds in ways you'd never believe. Martin St. Louis didn't look like an NHL player. He wasn't tall, he wasn't bulky, and when scouts watched him, they didn't see a future star. They saw someone who would never survive in a league dominated by size and strength. Too short, too light, too easy to knock off the puck. That was the narrative, and because of it, not a single team drafted him. Not one. Martin had to claw for everything. Every tryout, every training camp, every minor league opportunity. It wasn't just about proving he could score, it was about proving he belonged at all. He was constantly told no, but there was one thing nobody could measure: his heart. He trained like his career depended on it, because it did. He worked on his skating until it was world class. He studied angles, perfected his balance, and sharpened his hockey IQ. Martin wasn't just quick, he was relentless. That effort earned him a shot with the Calgary Flames, but even then, he barely got a chance. After a short stint, they let him go, and for a moment, it looked like his window might close for good. Then came Tampa Bay, and that's where everything changed. With the Lightning, St. Louis wasn't just good, he became elite. He turned into one of the most dynamic offensive players in the league. In the 2003-04 season, he exploded for 94 points, won the Art Ross Trophy as the NHL's leading scorer, and led Tampa Bay to their first ever Stanley Cup. Oh, and he also took home the Hart Trophy as the league's MVP. The same player that nobody wanted was now the most valuable in the game. But St. Louis didn't stop there. He proved it wasn't a fluke. He kept producing, kept leading, and kept defying expectations. He would go on to lead the league in scoring again in 2013. At the age of 37. No one had done that at his size, especially that late in their career. And even near the end, the doubt came back. When he was left off Team Canada's Olympic roster in 2014, it stung. He could have lashed out. He could have walked away, but he didn't. He trained harder, kept quiet, and when he finally got the call as an injury replacement, he didn't just join the team, he helped them win gold. That's who Martin St. Louis was. No excuses, just answers. He retired with over 1,000 points, a Stanley Cup, multiple scoring titles, and a Hall of Fame induction. But his biggest legacy isn't the stats or the awards, it's the mindset. He showed an entire generation of undersized players that skill and heart can break down any door, no matter how many times it's slammed in your face. Martin St. Louis didn't just make it to the NHL, he changed the idea of what an NHL player could be, all because he refused to believe he wasn't good enough, even when the whole world told him so. Tim Thomas didn't take the usual path to NHL stardom. He wasn't a top draft pick. He wasn't a teenage phenom lighting up highlight reels. In fact, he was barely on the radar. After college at the University of Vermont, most figured his NHL dream would quietly fade away. But instead of giving up, he went global, playing in Finland, Sweden, and grinding it out in minor leagues across North America. He was already in his 30s when he finally landed a consistent spot in the NHL. For most players, that would have been the twilight of their career. For Tim, it was just the beginning. When he finally got his shot as the Boston Bruins' starting goaltender, he grabbed it with both hands. He didn't just fill in, he took over. His style wasn't conventional, he didn't always look graceful, but it worked. And in 2011, everything came together. That year, Thomas put together one of the most legendary postseason performances in NHL history. Game after game, he stood on his head. It didn't matter if it was a breakaway, a power play, or a net front scramble. He found a way to stop it. With the entire city of Boston behind him, Thomas led the Bruins to their first Stanley Cup in nearly 4 decades. He finished with a jaw-dropping .967 save percentage in the final. At age 37, Thomas became the oldest player ever to win the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. He also won his second Vezina Trophy as the league's top goaltender that same season. Not bad for a guy everyone said was too unorthodox, too old school, too late. Even in a league dominated by younger, flashier goalies, Tim Thomas thrived with a style built on grit, chaos, and incredible mental toughness. He didn't care what the critics said. He didn't care about the odds. He just focused on the puck and gave his team a chance to win every single night. For years, people told him he wasn't built for the NHL, that his technique wouldn't last, that he didn't have the pedigree. But Thomas proved that experience, perseverance, and raw determination can outlast any doubt. Tim Thomas didn't just win games, he inspired belief. He showed every late bloomer, every journeyman, and every overlooked athlete that sometimes the story doesn't start until everyone else thinks it's already over. Because in hockey and in life, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Robin Lehner's biggest battle didn't happen between the pipes. It happened in silence, behind the scenes, and deep within his mind. For years, he lived two lives: the professional goalie with quick reflexes and a powerful presence, and the person quietly struggling with bipolar disorder, depression, and addiction. From the outside, he looked like your average NHL netminder. He showed up, put on his pads, and made saves. But inside, he was falling apart. The pressure, the pain, the weight of expectations. It all built up until he couldn't hide it anymore. In 2018, Lehner reached a breaking point and made the courageous decision to check into rehab. It wasn't just a turning point in his career. It was a turning point in his life. When he emerged, he didn't stay quiet. He did something almost unheard of in the NHL. He talked about it, publicly, openly, with no filter. He revealed everything: his diagnosis, his past drinking, the sleepless nights, and how close he had come to giving up. And instead of backlash, he received overwhelming support. He became a symbol of resilience and vulnerability, a voice for others who were silently suffering. Then he went back to the ice and played some of the best hockey of his life. In 2019, he joined the New York Islanders and quickly made an impact. He became a Vezina Trophy finalist and won the Masterton Trophy for perseverance and dedication to hockey. Fans now saw him in a different light, not just as a talented goalie, but as someone who had survived something far more dangerous than a slap shot. Lehner didn't just return, he thrived. He later played for Vegas, anchoring the Golden Knights through deep playoff runs, all while continuing to advocate for mental health awareness. His honesty and bravery helped break the stigma in a league where toughness is too often confused with silence. Robin Lehner's story is more than a hockey comeback. It's about courage, about facing the battles nobody sees, about standing up and saying, "I'm not okay, but I'm still here." And that message, it's more powerful than any save he's ever made. Josh Harding was at the top of his game when his life changed forever. As the Minnesota Wild's promising goalie, he had worked his way up through years of dedication. But in 2012, he received a diagnosis that rocked his world: multiple sclerosis. MS isn't just a physical condition, it's a neurological disease that can disrupt your balance, coordination, and energy. For any athlete, it's devastating. For a goaltender who relies on reflexes and razor-sharp movement, it could have meant the end of the road. But Harding didn't flinch. Instead of stepping back, he suited up, not out of denial, but out of determination. He began the season knowing every practice, every game might come with unpredictable symptoms. But he kept playing, and more than that, he played incredibly well. Harding's 2013 season was nothing short of inspiring. Despite dealing with fatigue, medication, and all the uncertainty that comes with MS, he posted a .933 save percentage across 29 games, one of the best in the league that year. He wasn't just stopping pucks, he was sending a message to millions: this doesn't define me. For his courage and perseverance, Harding won the 2013 Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy. But no award could truly capture what he meant to the people watching, especially those living with invisible illnesses. Even when MS forced him to step away from the NHL, just a couple of years later, Harding's impact lived on. He inspired conversations, increased awareness, and showed what resilience looks like in real life, not just in headlines. Josh Harding didn't ask for sympathy, he didn't want pity, he just wanted to compete. And in doing so, he gave hope to people all over the world, not just hockey fans. Bobby Ryan's journey to the NHL didn't start like most top picks. In fact, his entire childhood was spent in survival mode. Before he ever picked up a stick for a serious team, he and his mother were living under assumed names, running from danger. His father had been arrested for domestic violence, and for their safety, the two of them changed their identities and fled across the country. Just like that, Bobby Stevenson became Bobby Ryan. For years, he wasn't even allowed to use his real name in public. He lived with fear, always watching over his shoulder. There were no normal childhood milestones, just secrecy, anxiety, and a heavy emotional weight that no young kid should ever have to carry. And yet, he kept playing hockey. Even while bouncing around cities and trying to stay invisible, the one constant was the ice. That's where he could just be a kid again. He showed raw talent early, and by the time he reached his teens, scouts were buzzing. Despite the trauma he carried, Bobby had the skill and size to be something special. He was eventually drafted second overall in 2005, just one spot behind Sidney Crosby, a moment that should have been the beginning of a fairy tale. But the truth is, the darkness never completely left him. Ryan had solid seasons with the Anaheim Ducks and Ottawa Senators. On the ice, he was a top 6 forward with a lethal wrist shot and underrated hands. Off the ice, though, the weight of his past and the stress that came with it began to manifest in a different form: alcoholism. It crept in slowly. At first, it was something to numb the pain. Then it became a pattern, and eventually it threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. His production dropped, his health suffered, and people around the league began to wonder if his story was about to end early. But Bobby Ryan wasn't finished. In 2019, he entered the NHL's Player Assistance Program to get sober. It was a bold and vulnerable decision, and it changed his life. He stepped away from the game, went through rehab, and when he returned, he gave fans one of the most emotional moments in recent NHL memory. In his first home game back with the Ottawa Senators, Bobby scored a hat trick, 3 goals, a standing ovation, and tears. Not just in his eyes, but in the crowd, in the booth, and in every living room watching across Canada. He didn't try to hold it in. He let the moment wash over him. And for that one night, hockey was more than just a game. That wasn't a comeback. That was redemption. Bobby Ryan never won a scoring title or lifted the Stanley Cup. But in that moment, he showed the world something bigger. That even when life breaks you down, it's still possible to stand back up, skate forward, and rewrite your story. He wasn't just a hockey player that night. He was a symbol of second chances, living proof that it's never too late to begin again. Jonathan Cheechoo's NHL dream started in one of the most unlikely places imaginable, Moose Factory, a small indigenous community in remote northern Ontario. There were no fancy rinks, no elite level coaches, and no scouts passing through. Just a boy with a pair of skates, frozen rivers, and a deep love for the game. His family didn't have much money, but they had something stronger: belief. His parents would drive hours just to get him to games, sacrificing time and energy so their son could chase a dream that, on paper, seemed impossible. Cheechoo learned early what it meant to work for everything. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't a YouTube sensation or a can't-miss prospect, but he was hungry. He pushed himself through the junior ranks and eventually earned a shot with the San Jose Sharks. For years, he was just another name in the lineup, but then came the 2005-06 season, and everything changed. Cheechoo exploded for 56 goals, more than anyone else in the league. He won the Maurice Rocket Richard Trophy, beating out superstars with far bigger reputations and far flashier pedigrees. His shot became lethal. His timing was perfect. For that one magical season, Cheechoo wasn't just good, he was unstoppable. Fans fell in love with the quiet kid from the north who came out of nowhere and lit up the NHL. He became a symbol of possibility for indigenous kids, for small town dreamers, for anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. His time at the top didn't last forever. Injuries, style of play changes, and a shifting NHL landscape caught up with him. But that doesn't erase what he did, because for that one shining moment, Jonathan Cheechoo proved that greatness isn't reserved for the chosen few. It's there for anyone willing to chase it with everything they have. In 2002, at just 26 years old, Montreal Canadiens captain Saku Koivu made an announcement that stunned the hockey world. He had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of cancer. It was unexpected, gut-wrenching news, not just because of who he was as a player, but because of what he meant to Montreal. Koivu wasn't just a skilled center, he was a symbol of leadership, loyalty, and heart. And now, his career and life were in jeopardy. The months that followed were brutal. Chemotherapy, hospital visits, isolation. He lost weight, he lost strength, but what he never lost was his spirit. While others doubted if he'd ever play again, Koivu was quietly preparing for the fight of his life. Late that season, he returned, and when he stepped onto the Bell Center ice, the crowd rose. For nearly 8 full minutes, fans stood and cheered. People cried, teammates tapped their sticks, even opposing players were visibly emotional. It wasn't just a hockey moment, it was a life moment. Koivu didn't just come back, he played nearly another decade. He remained captain, earned the Masterton Trophy, and became one of the most respected leaders in hockey. He was never the loudest guy in the room, but when he spoke, people listened. More than the goals or assists, his legacy lies in that night, that ovation, that roar of 21,000 fans saying, "We're with you." Saku Koivu showed the world that sometimes the biggest victories don't come with a trophy. They come just by standing back up. In 2017, Brian Boyle was preparing for yet another NHL season. A veteran forward known for his size, leadership, and two-way play, Boyle had carved out a respectable career. But just before the puck dropped that fall, doctors gave him news no athlete ever wants to hear. Leukemia. He had chronic myeloid leukemia, a form of blood cancer. And the shocking part, he didn't even feel sick. There were no warning signs, just routine tests that revealed a silent threat growing inside him. Most would have stepped away from the game, focused on recovery, and no one would have blamed him. But Boyle chose a different route. Just a month later, he was back on the ice, suiting up for the New Jersey Devils. Not as a ceremonial gesture, but to compete, to battle in the corners, take hits, block shots. He didn't want sympathy, he wanted to play. Then came Hockey Fights Cancer Night, a special game on the NHL calendar. That night, Boyle scored a goal. He looked up, pointed to the sky, and was embraced by his teammates. The arena exploded. It wasn't just a goal. It was a moment of survival, resilience, and heart. He later won the Masterton Trophy for perseverance. But even without it, fans knew they had witnessed something special. Brian Boyle didn't just return to the NHL, he reminded everyone that life is unpredictable, but what you do with that unpredictability defines who you are. Curtis Cujo, Joseph, didn't grow up like most NHL legends. He wasn't raised in a house full of trophies or coached by elite trainers. He was raised in a group home, placed there after being given up at birth. His early life was filled with uncertainty, but he found one thing that made sense: hockey. Goaltending became his safe space. He wasn't highly recruited, and he didn't come with the hype, but he had raw reflexes, a love for the game, and an iron will. Despite being undrafted in his first year of eligibility, he eventually earned a spot in the NHL and never let go. Joseph played over 900 games and racked up 454 wins, placing him among the top 10 winningest goalies in the league history at the time of his retirement. He didn't win a Stanley Cup, but that hardly mattered. Night after night, he faced the league's best scorers and stole games his teams had no business winning. Whether it was with St. Louis, Edmonton, Toronto, or Detroit, fans always knew Cujo would give them a chance. His style was aggressive. His saves were electric. His story, one of pure grit. Curtis Joseph may not have had the NHL dream handed to him, but he carved it out stop by stop, with nothing more than talent and toughness. When Zdeno Chara first entered the hockey world, most didn't see potential. They saw a problem. At 6'9", he was towering and awkward. Coaches said he was too big to move efficiently. Scouts predicted he'd never make it out of the minors. Some even suggested he'd give up hockey altogether, but Chara didn't listen. He worked obsessively on his skating, balance, and technique. He studied nutrition, flexibility, and fitness. He turned his size into an advantage, and slowly but surely, he went from long shot to franchise cornerstone. As the years passed, he didn't just improve, he dominated. With his reach, strength, and punishing slap shot, he became one of the most feared defensemen of his era. In 2009, he won the Norris Trophy as the league's best defenseman. In 2011, he captained the Boston Bruins to a Stanley Cup, becoming the first Slovak-born captain to hoist the trophy. His leadership, poise, and example were unmatched. Chara played over 1,600 NHL games, many of them as the oldest player on the ice. And even into his 40s, he was logging top pairing minutes. He proved that size wasn't a limitation. It was a weapon. And every time he stepped onto the ice, he proved that what others see as a weakness can become your biggest strength. Rich Peverley wasn't supposed to make the NHL. He wasn't drafted. He didn't have a superstar junior career. No one was lining up to sign him, but he kept going. He grinded through college hockey at St. Lawrence University, then paid his dues in the minors year after year, just trying to get noticed. Eventually, hard work paid off. Peverley broke into the NHL and carved out a solid career as a dependable two-way forward. He wasn't flashy. He didn't put up crazy numbers. But coaches loved him because he did the little things right. He killed penalties, won faceoffs, made smart passes, and never took a shift off. He played with purpose and with heart. But in March 2014, during a game with the Dallas Stars, everything changed in an instant. While sitting on the bench, Peverley suddenly collapsed. His heart had stopped. It wasn't a hit. It wasn't a play. It was silent and sudden and terrifying. Medical staff immediately sprang into action using a defibrillator to revive him, while teammates and fans watched in stunned silence. The entire building froze. Players looked away. The game was postponed. Everyone thought the worst. But Peverley survived. His playing career was over, but instead of fading away, he stayed close to the game. He joined the Stars in a player development role, helping younger athletes navigate both hockey and life. He turned tragedy into mentorship, using his own story to raise awareness about heart health in athletes and to remind others that life is fragile and precious. Even though his time on the ice was cut short, Peverley's legacy kept growing. His story became a symbol of resilience, preparedness, and gratitude. And in a league known for toughness, he showed a different kind of strength, the kind that keeps showing up, even after everything changes. Craig Anderson was never the face of a franchise. He didn't win Vexnas or make highlight reels every week, but what he did season after season was show up when it mattered most. For more than 2 decades, he was the steady, calming presence in net for whichever team needed him. Anderson played for several clubs throughout his career: Chicago, Colorado, Ottawa, Buffalo, and wherever he went, he earned respect. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he was dependable. The kind of goalie who quietly stole games and gave his team a fighting chance every night. But in 2016, the biggest test of his life came off the ice. His wife, Nicola, was diagnosed with nasopharyngeal cancer. He took a leave of absence from the Ottawa Senators to be by her side. In those moments, hockey suddenly took a back seat. When he returned, no one expected much. How could anyone play through something like that? Anderson didn't just play, he delivered one of the most inspiring performances of his career. In his first game back, he posted a shutout win, tears in his eyes as the final buzzer sounded. His teammates mobbed him. Fans stood and cheered. It was a moment that transcended sport. That season, he helped lead the Sens on a deep playoff run and earned the Masterton Trophy for perseverance. But Anderson didn't stop there. He continued to play until age 41, well beyond what most thought possible, finishing his career with over 700 NHL games. He never needed the spotlight. His consistency, humility, and quiet strength spoke volumes. Kevin Bieksa's path to the NHL was never guaranteed. Coming out of Bowling Green University, he wasn't a big-name prospect. He was physical, scrappy, and competitive, but didn't have the offensive numbers that get people excited. The Vancouver Canucks took a chance on him with a two-way AHL contract, more of a see-what-happens deal than a commitment, but Bieksa made the most of it. In the minors, he showed exactly who he was. A no-nonsense, hard-hitting defenseman who played with passion and had leadership written all over him. He could fight. He could shut down top forwards. And he surprised people with his offensive instincts too. Once he broke into the NHL, he never looked back. Bieksa became one of the cornerstones of the Canucks' blue line. He helped lead the team to the 2011 Stanley Cup Final, anchoring a defense that combined skill and snarl. And in the Western Conference Final, he scored one of the most iconic goals in Canucks history, an unexpected, chaotic overtime winner that sent Vancouver to the Cup Final for the first time in 17 years. He was the type of player teammates respected and opponents hated playing against. Gritty, tough, honest, and off the ice he showed another side, witty, articulate, and thoughtful. After retirement, he transitioned into broadcasting, quickly becoming a fan favorite on Hockey Night in Canada for his honesty and intelligence. Kevin Bieksa's story isn't about being flashy, it's about maximizing every opportunity and proving that heart and leadership go a long way. Alex Stalock was never the goalie getting all the headlines. He wasn't a top draft pick. He didn't have a massive contract or international spotlight, but what he did have was grit and a relentless drive to stay in the game no matter what life threw at him. In 2021, just when it seemed like his NHL career was finally gaining stability, disaster struck. After recovering from COVID-19, Stalock began experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath, and extreme fatigue. Doctors soon discovered he had myocarditis, a rare but serious inflammation of the heart. It wasn't just a health scare. It was a possible career-ending condition. Most players would have walked away quietly, but Stalock? He refused to give in. He spent the next several months training in silence. No cameras, no social media updates, just a man trying to reclaim the game he loved. Slowly, carefully, he worked his way back into condition. Then in 2022, he signed with the Chicago Blackhawks and returned to NHL action. Every save he made wasn't just for the scoreboard, it was a statement. I'm still here. His comeback didn't grab national headlines, but for those who knew what he'd overcome, it was one of the season's most inspiring stories. He reminded fans that resilience isn't always loud, but it's powerful. Pat LaFontaine was electric, one of the most skilled American-born players to ever hit the ice. He combined elite speed, soft hands, and off-the-charts hockey IQ. When he had the puck, the game slowed down. Defenders backed off. Goalies flinched, but behind all the brilliance was a battle that never really stopped. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, LaFontaine suffered multiple concussions, many of them serious. At the time, head injuries weren't taken seriously. Players were expected to tough it out, even when they couldn't see straight, and Pat did because that's what players were told to do. Despite missing long stretches due to injury, he still managed to put up over 1,000 points in just 865 games. That kind of production, even by today's standards, is elite. But each time he returned, the hits got harder. The symptoms got worse. Eventually, the risks were too great. He retired earlier than most stars of his caliber. His body couldn't take it anymore. Still, his impact on American hockey was massive. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, became an advocate for players' safety, and inspired a generation of US kids to dream big. Pat LaFontaine's career may have been cut short, but he proved that even when the time is limited, brilliance can still leave a permanent mark. Mario Lemieux wasn't just a star, he was something bigger. He was a generational force. A 6'4" forward with silky hands, elite vision, and the kind of poise under pressure that made him look like he was playing in slow motion. By the early 90s, Lemieux had already secured multiple Art Ross trophies, Hart trophies, and had led the Pittsburgh Penguins to back-to-back Stanley Cups. Then everything stopped. In January 1993, the hockey world was stunned when Lemieux announced he had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of cancer. It was more than just a pause in a career. It was a terrifying moment where fans, teammates, and rivals all held their breath. Mario, seemingly untouchable on the ice, was now in the fight of his life. He began treatment, weeks of radiation, physical weakness, and emotional uncertainty. Most assumed his season was over. Some even feared his career might be done. But Lemieux was never ordinary. On the very day he completed his final radiation session, he flew to Philadelphia, suited up, and scored a goal. It wasn't just a highlight, it was a miracle. He didn't just return. He went on to win the scoring title that season while battling cancer. It's one of the most astonishing comebacks in sports history. But that wasn't the last time Lemieux saved the day. Years later, when the Penguins were on the verge of bankruptcy, Mario stepped up again, this time off the ice. He converted deferred salary into ownership equity and became the first player owner in NHL history. Without him, there's a good chance the Penguins would have been relocated or folded altogether. Lemieux went on to make a second comeback as a player, mentoring a young Sidney Crosby and helping lay the foundation for the next great Penguins dynasty. Mario Lemieux didn't just beat cancer. He rescued a franchise, inspired millions, and reminded the world that true greatness is about more than talent. It's about grit, grace, and giving back when it matters most. When Brent Burns entered the NHL, he was a bit of a puzzle. Big frame, long reach, good skating, but he didn't quite fit the mold. Some saw him as a forward, others tried him on defense. Coaches weren't sure where to put him, and his game looked raw, awkward even. For years, Burns bounced between roles, shifting from one position to another, never fully settling in. It could have gone sideways. A lesser player might have faded out, but Burns didn't give up, he adapted. When he arrived in San Jose, the Sharks made a bold decision. They converted him into a full-time defenseman. That switch unlocked everything. Suddenly Burns was everywhere, throwing big hits, jumping into the rush, launching bombs from the blue line. And through it all, his wild beard and unique personality made him one of the league's most recognizable faces. In 2017, he was awarded the Norris Trophy as the NHL's best defenseman. It was the ultimate validation. The once awkward misfit had become a cornerstone player, an all-star, a fan favorite, and a leader. But maybe the most important part of his story, he did it all without changing who he was. From his offbeat interviews to his wild outdoor adventures, Burns embraced being different, and it worked. He showed that sometimes being unconventional isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. At 5'6", Theo Fleury was always the smallest guy on the ice, but he played like he was 6'4". Fast, fiery, and fearless, he threw hits, dropped gloves, and scored clutch goals. He had over 1,000 points, won a Stanley Cup, and earned an Olympic gold medal. But what fans didn't see was the pain underneath it all. As a teenager in junior hockey, Fleury was the victim of repeated sexual abuse at the hands of his coach. It was a trauma that he buried deep and tried to drown out for years. After reaching the NHL, he carried that pain in silence, coping through addiction, anger, and self-destruction. Alcohol, drugs, chaos. Behind the headlines and highlight reels, Fleury was spiraling. Eventually, it all caught up to him. He left the league, hit rock bottom, nearly lost everything, but somehow he found the strength to start over. Fleury got sober. He wrote a raw and emotional memoir called Playing with Fire, where he publicly shared his story of abuse and addiction. It was a bombshell in the hockey world, but it also opened doors for conversations long overdue. Today, Fleury is more than a former NHL star. He's a speaker, advocate, and survivor. He uses his platform to support others dealing with trauma, especially within sports and youth communities. He was tough on the ice, but tougher in life. Theo Fleury showed the world that healing is possible and that your past doesn't define your future. On February 22nd, 2020, the unthinkable happened. During a game between the Carolina Hurricanes and Toronto Maple Leafs, both of Carolina's goalies went down with injuries. NHL rules required an emergency backup goalie, so they turned to the only person available, David Ayres, a 42-year-old Zamboni driver. Not a pro, not a backup, just a guy who helped out during practices and worked at the arena. Ayres had never played in an NHL game. He wasn't even in uniform until the chaos started. But when they called his name, he suited up, stepped onto the ice in enemy territory, and took the net. Most people would have cracked under the pressure, but not Ayres. He allowed 2 quick goals, then settled in. He stopped 8 shots, secured the win, and became the first emergency backup goalie in NHL history to win a game. The hockey world went nuts. Social media exploded. Late night shows featured him. He appeared on morning TV. His stick went to the Hockey Hall of Fame, but Ayres remained humble. He credited his teammates, his wife, and the Hurricanes for believing in him. His story wasn't about talent or training. It was about readiness, courage, and saying yes when the moment comes. David Ayres reminded us all that you never know when your shot will come, but when it does, you better be ready to stop pucks. Most NHL players have a moment when they arrive. A big goal, a big contract, a big storyline. Chad Ruhwedel never had one of those. He was undrafted, undersized, unnoticed. For nearly a decade, he bounced between the AHL and NHL, called up for a few games, then sent back down. He wasn't on posters, He wasn't in video games, but he showed up every day. He practiced hard, stayed late, watched video, took pride in being the 7th defenseman, even when it meant sitting in the press box more than skating on the ice. He was quiet, but consistent, the kind of player coaches trusted when everything was on the line. And eventually, the Pittsburgh Penguins noticed. Ruhwedel became a reliable depth defenseman on one of the most successful teams of the 2010s. He was part of 2 Stanley Cup winning rosters, earning rings not because of flash, but because of grit, humility, and a total commitment to the team. He didn't need headlines. He just needed a shot, and when it came, he made it count. Chad Ruhwedel's story is about patience, about doing the work no one sees, and about proving that you don't have to be a star to be a champion. These stories prove that no matter the odds, anything is possible. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another one. And if you love hockey history, don't miss our next video, the entire history of the NHL, from day 1 to today. It's the full journey like you've never seen before. Thanks for watching.